people were using the term taco. Trump always chickens out. I don't think he wants to be taco. I think he wants to be Trump. He wants to be seen as the guy that did this.
Today is Wednesday, February 25th. This is Boundless Insights, and I'm Aviva Klompas. For weeks, President Trump has threatened military action against Iran unless Tehran gets serious about negotiations. Now, so far, there's no indication that the Ayatollahs are willing to make meaningful concessions on their nuclear program, their ballistic missile program, or their support for terror groups across the region. The Pentagon is building up the largest force of American warships and aircraft in the Middle East in decades. In response, Iran is repositioning its own forces, moving missiles within range of Israel and along the Persian Gulf, where U.S. military bases are exposed. Israelis are bracing for the possibility of war, and multiple countries are urging their citizens to leave Iran. What remains unclear is whether the show of force is meant to produce a diplomatic breakthrough, or if a military confrontation is imminent. To help us make sense of the moment, I'm joined by Jonathan Schanzer, Executive Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and a leading expert on Iran, U.S. national security, and Middle East strategy. Let's get into it. Jonathan Schanzer, the man who has all the answers, welcome back to Boundless Insights.
Thanks, Aviva. Great to be with you.
I am grateful you're here because we all want to know, is there going to be a war with Iran? When's there going to be a war with Iran? Who's starting the war with Iran? Enlighten us.
Okay, first, let's just start by noting that whatever this war becomes, the United States didn't start it. This started with the Iranian regime chanting death to America, holding hostages for 444 days at the start of the revolution, carrying out proxy war against America's allies across the region. This is not a peaceful regime. It has been wreaking havoc across the region now since 1979. The only thing that's surprising here is that it has taken this long to piss off an American president so much that said president is willing to attack the regime outright just for being the regime. And that's kind of what's going on here right now. I think Donald Trump understands that he's already invested a lot in the region. And I don't just mean the Board of Peace or what happens in Gaza. I think we're talking about ensuring the safety and security of the Saudis and the Emiratis and other wealthy countries, even Qatar. Hate to say that out loud, but I think it's true. And this is a man who's trying to remake the region into something that is more peaceful, more docile, more productive, and more prosperous. Now, as for when this thing pops off, as they say in Israel, your Geshem is as good as Mayim. Yeah, I know, it's really bad. It's a dad joke. It's a dad joke. But no,
we got to translate, though. We got to translate. Not everybody will understand Hebrew.
Your rain is as good as water.
Yes. Geshem is rain. Mayim is water.
Yeah.
That was good.
I seriously, I don't know. But I will say that when I look out at what's going on across the region right now, the Indians have recalled their people from Iran. The Koreans have recalled their people. The U.S. is recalling personnel from Lebanon. This reminds me a lot of the day or two before the Operation Rising Lion launched by the Israelis. This does really strike me. I'm having a little bit of PTSD as I watch all this happen because it really does look like the prelude to war. But then again, we have been watching the prelude to war for a month now.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
Let me ask you about it. You seem pretty certain that there's going to be military action. But there is the possibility that this is just a massive coercive pressure campaign to try to force a diplomatic resolution. Because these Oman broker talks are ongoing between the United States and Iran, do you think that there is any possible diplomatic off-ramp?
Look, there is, but it all depends on the Islamic Republic. Okay, let's break this down. There are 4 things that we should be asking of the regime right now for some kind of a diplomatic solution to the standoff. Number 1 is an end to all nukes. Not some kind of interim deal, but a permanent end to Iran's nuclear ambitions. That's number 1. Number 2, end of the ballistic missile program, the threat that it poses to U.S. bases and U.S. allies across the region, not to mention oil installations, which are important to the United States. The third is an end to all proxy activity. So Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Shia militias in Iraq, all of them have to go. And then the last demand would be human rights inside Iran. No more slaughter of 40,000 people, allowing for people to speak their mind, to wear what they want, to say what they want.
Can I give you the short answer on each of those so everybody knows the position? On nukes, they've said they're willing to discuss minor concessions. On ballistic missiles, they've said we're not talking about it. On proxies, they've said we're not talking about it. And the protester one, it actually seems like the United States backed down off of that one.
And I think we did. But let me just say, the Islamic Republic agreeing to all four of those would mean the end of the Islamic Republic,
right,
which would essentially be regime change, right? I mean, let's just be honest here. If the Islamic Republic is no longer threatening its neighbors, no longer cracking down on its own people, no longer sponsoring mayhem and making dash for nukes, this is not the Islamic Republic, okay? This is some other regime that I don't recognize. And so I just don't see any of this happening. Now, what worries me, what worries my colleagues right now, is this idea that maybe the Islamic Republic says, well, we're willing to do a temporary deal on nukes. We'll put a pause. We'll do some kind of too clever by half agreement with the United States, kind of like what we saw in 2015 with the Obama administration and the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And to that effect, we're actually seeing that Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, has been invited to the next set of talks in Geneva. I don't like that at all, because it means that we're getting technical. And with all due respect to Stephen Witkoff, I don't want him getting technical. I don't think the president's envoy should be talking about uranium enrichment levels or blending down. This is a binary. I know we're supposed to be talking about things that are non-binary. This is binary, right? Either you're ending the program or you're not. There's not a lot of fuzzy area in between that I think the United States should have any patience for. So yeah, I'm a little nervous about a partial deal that only handles one of the four, and even that, a partial measure out of the one, the nuclear file. That to me seems like not a great outcome.
But from Iran's perspective, it's a great strategy because they just have to get past 3 years. And they have to hope that whomever the next president is will either be a Democrat that'll have no time and patience for this, or somebody else from the MAGA movement that says America first, and again, has no time and patience for this. And so it's in their interest to just squeeze by 3 years with whatever types of concessions they can manage.
Okay, so a few things. Number one, if Marco Rubio becomes president, and I don't think there's a zero chance of that, then the regime finds itself exactly where it is right now. And the rope-a-dope that they play for 3 years is for naught. The other thing that I'll just say here is that the idea that this president has the patience for 3 years of shenanigans from the Islamic Republic, to me, just does not seem realistic.
I agree with you, but what I think he doesn't have is an interest in waging war when he's got so many problems domestically between tariffs, between ICE, between a midterm election that doesn't look like it's going to go so well for his party. What does he need a war with Iran for?
I think that is possibly correct. This president has choices to make. And I do think, let's call it the neo-isolationist right, the MAGA true believer right. I think they're shocked at how much of an internationalist this man has become. You got the Board of Peace that is not just interested in solving the Gaza problem, but they're talking about solving 7, 8, 9, 10 different conflicts around the world. Donald Trump's just wrapping his arms around the globe right now. And on top of that, he's talking about regime change in Iran. And the MAGA faithful are still with him. And that, I think, is fascinating. Now, this doesn't say that Donald Trump is not going to lose some votes in the midterms. And I do think that he can still make missteps that could erode some of his support. But this is a president, if he's decided that the Middle East is important to him and he wants to remake it in his image, taking out the Islamic Republic is the thing to do. Now, the one thing that we haven't talked about, Aviva, is This idea of a limited strike.
Well, hold on. I made the argument for why he might not want to do it, but let me float the argument for why he might feel like he has to do it. I wonder if he's actually gone and backed himself into a corner because he tweeted or truth socialed so explicitly about coming to the support of the protesters, because he spoke repeatedly about Iran cannot have any nuclear weapon. And now failing to act would be like repeating the Obama-era red line in Syria. And that was when the U.S. warned of consequences, didn't enforce them, and it signaled that American threats could be ignored. And that notion, I think, probably doesn't sit well with President Trump.
No, it doesn't. And I've got to say, yes, the man has a choice. He could be Reagan, bringing down an evil empire, or he could be Obama, which is rolling over on his own red lines and disgracing himself in front of the world and allowing for mass slaughter to take place. I think he'd rather be Reagan. And I do think that that's probably some kind of psychological factor that's weighing on him. I think there's also, maybe more immediately, let's just forget about that long view of history dating back to the early 1980s of Reagan, because who talks about that kind of stuff anymore? What I would say is this guy has just put a massive armada out in the Middle East for a month. And the cost of that, I don't know exactly what it costs, but it ain't cheap. Gallons of fuel and man hours and keeping our weapon systems primed and ready to go. People were using the term taco. Trump always chickens out. I don't think he wants to be taco. I think he wants to be Trump. He wants to be seen as the guy that did this. If you ask me, I think he's been waiting because he wanted to get more air defenses in the region. I think he's worried about those thousands of ballistic missiles that the Islamic Republic is very likely to try to launch all in one go. And I think he wants to try to protect Americans, American bases, American assets like oil facilities. He wants to protect Israel. He wants to protect the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis. And so I think he's waited until he's had enough of that firepower amassed in the region. And I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of days. I wonder whether he was able to get other countries on board. I mean, I know the Brits, for example, have put some of their assets in Cyprus to try to shoot down drones and missiles that might be coming into the region. Obviously, the Israelis are all in. What about some of these other countries in the region?
Well, the Saudis and the Emiratis have said they would not allow the U.S. strikes to be launched from their territory.
Yes.
And my question is that what we say out loud? But do we do something different? Tell us.
I remember one of the first articles I wrote when I first got to D.C., it was the buildup to the Iraq War. One of my first assignments was to look at how was the Gulf reacting. And the Gulf was doing the same thing back then. And I remember the title of the piece was Survival of the Skittish.
That's great.
Talking about the Gulf states and how they don't want to put themselves in the crosshairs of the Islamic Republic. But I can imagine that if the war is going well, let's say the administration starts and they take out all the rocket launchers and early goings and they take out a bunch of the assets of the Islamic Republic, maybe they just bandwagon. They're like, hey, let's just do this. Let's just get rid of this regime once and for all. I don't know if there's a zero chance of that. I do think that they're all still going to be pretty skittish, but I do think that everybody would cheer the downfall of this regime in the region.
Oh, yeah, after the fact.
After the fact.
Tell us your thoughts. You were starting to talk about a limited strike versus an all-out war. Obviously, I'm sure he wants something like what happened in June. 12 days, wrap it up, can declare a few victories. What about this time?
Look, I think he'd still like this to be neat and easy and clean. I got news for the big fella. Wars are never neat and easy and clean. It's just not how it works.
Except his track record shows that's what he does, right? That is what he did with Iran in June. That is what he did in Venezuela.
It's true.
No American casualties in either instance.
True. But I will also say the enemy does sometimes get a vote. The one thing that we've lost here, and this bothers me, the element of surprise is not a thing anymore.
I was going to say, we are all watching this, yeah.
Oh my God, for a month, it's been like watching the Golf Channel or like watching paint dry. I mean, choose your analogy. It's been boring as hell. But the thing is that it's given the Islamic Republic plenty of time to think about how they want to attack an American destroyer, how they want to attack American warships, how they want to attack an aircraft carrier, how they want to attack the United States at home with sleeper cells, or Europe, or the Arab states, or oil installations, or you name it.
Or Jewish sites across the world.
Well, the Islamic Republic does not need to go to war in order to do that. That's like a day ending in Y.
Just a hobby for them?
It's just a thing that they do for kicks. And so, yeah, I think all of those things are actually quite feasible and maybe even likely. But I will say the president has come out and said, we may do a limited strike and then have a conversation with the regime, as if that might chasten the regime to then say, oh, you know what? I see what you guys are capable of doing. And you know what? We decided we're going to talk instead.
That doesn't sound like them.
No, doesn't sound like them. And also, do you think they don't know what the U.S. is capable of already? Of course they know. I mean, we have arguably the strongest military on the planet. They've seen what happened to Saddam Hussein. They've seen what happened to their own nuclear sites with not a lot of bombs dropped. They know what's coming, and yet they have refused to negotiate in good faith. So I don't see the one-off strike as being the thing that gets us there. Look, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Donald Trump knows something that I don't. And you mentioned Venezuela. We could Maduro the guy.
Do you think we could actually go and nab him?
So here's the thing. Nabbing is hard. This guy's in a bunker deep below the ground, and he's surrounded by the true believers of the regime. This is the thing that Maduro didn't have. Nobody believed in Maduroism. Nobody believed in Venezuela as some kind of revolutionary government. It wasn't a thing, right? So these idiots that were surrounding Maduro could be bought off or told to go home. And in some cases, they just did. I think it's going to be harder to nab the supreme leader. It's probably easier to bomb him. But I think the other thing that we can do, we being the United States military, the DIA, the CIA, our intelligence community, we're probably doing outreach right now to people further down the chain from the top clerics and the top IRGC guys, with the idea of wondering, can we carry out some kind of internal coup to find an element with the regime that is more willing to cooperate with the United States, kind of like what we've done with the Maduro regime. People say that that was regime change. It wasn't. The entire regime is in place minus one guy. Could we pull off something like that with limited strikes and open up new possibilities for the Islamic Republic? I don't know the answer to that, but I will just say war is just filled with unintended consequences and surprises. I'm expecting those in this case. I don't think that Donald Trump's going to get the easy out, but I am curious to see. He's had a lot of time to prepare, just as the Iranians have for their response. But if you ask me, Donald Trump is probably prepared for something that we haven't thought of.
That's what I was going to say. I've been impressed by the creativity of war these past 2 years, both on the part of the United States and on the part of Israel, which makes me wonder, do you think Israel's going to sit this one out? Or is the plan in the works between the two countries?
I don't know how to answer that.
Because it's classified?
And I'd have to kill you. Honestly, I don't know where the Israelis go first. I have heard that the moment that war breaks out with Iran, the Israelis go north and take out the 20% of Hezbollah's arsenal, because that's the thing that's like staring them in the face and they can't have it. Then again, we've got this bromance between Bibi and Trump. They worked very closely together during the 12-day war, during Rising Lion / Midnight Hammer last year. Do they have more tricks up their sleeve? Are they going to do more misdirection? It doesn't have to be either or. The Israelis can spend a day or two knocking out the Hezbollah assets and then take it east. I don't know. But there's a lot going on here. Without a doubt, the Israelis are providing a lot of intel that the United States is looking at. That goes without question.
Let me ask you something that I've always wondered, because Netanyahu and Trump have met in person so many times since the start of this administration's term. Is that actually necessary? Are there things that can only be discussed in person because they're ultra classified? Or is this theater?
Again, if I told you, Yeah, I have no idea.
It's curious how often he hops on a plane.
Yeah, as they say in Hebrew, like a conversation for four eyes only. Maybe that's what's going on. I will say that all this talk of Trump being done with Bibi or being frustrated with Bibi,
Well, I think that's just what Israeli reporters do every time there's a meeting. Oh, it's not going to go well. Oh, there's going to be a scolding.
or there's misdirection, which is what happened before the 12-day war,
Right.
where everybody was saying they're annoyed at each other, they're not getting along. And the next thing you know, the Israelis,
Boom.
right? So I'm expecting misdirection. I'm expecting things to surprise. But one does get a sense after the last 2 days that things do seem like they're accelerating in a different direction right now. Now, Trump could always stand down again. I've heard that a month ago, when we first thought that the United States was going to strike Iran, that we were 17 minutes away from hitting targets in Iran. We could do that again. Trump could order it and then order them to stand down. But my guess is a lot of this has been working with our allies, not just the Israelis, finding a comfort zone with some of these other countries that have been skittish, because this region, they don't have a lot of professional militaries. Let's just put it that way. Their air defenses may be spotty, but we've got a lot of assets in the region now to protect them, and I'm looking at that without question.
Let me ask you a question about Israel's readiness. So we had heard that Iranian missile and drone attacks forced Israel to conserve interceptors. And Israeli officials have warned that a prolonged conflict could strain the air defenses. What's your assessment of how exposed Israel is right now, and how much would that shape decision making?
I think they're exposed. And I think that a month ago, when the Trump administration was ready to do its thing, the reports were at the time, Bibi got nervous. And it could have been Bibi that actually called off that last attempted strike or aborted strike. Look, we know that Arrow 3 interceptors, the ones that hit the ballistic missiles, they're in demand. There's not a lot of supply. They're expensive. They're like $3 to $5 million a pop, and they're not easy to mass produce. They're produced here in the United States. I think there's some nerves there. They've been looking at ways to repurpose David Sling, the mid-range stuff. I don't know how successful that will be. I've actually even heard that they're looking at ways to repurpose Iron Dome, and I don't know how successful they've been. Look, this is like classic Israeli defense story, necessity being the mother of invention. They're looking at everything they've got right now. But if you ask me, it's probably more THAADs in the theater from the United States that are there to protect the skies over Israel. They'll have F-35s and F-16s in the air to take out the drones. And of course, Iron Dome can do that as well. But yeah, I think they're exposed. And even when the Israelis had a fair amount of interceptors during that last war, a number of them got through.
Right.
And for that, I think we just need to acknowledge two things. One is the Iranians got better at doing this. Their ability to learn the physics and to use these weapons to their advantage, they climbed a learning curve. And I think we need to understand that they will be better this time than they were last time. Now, there are things that the Israelis did last time that they're probably doing again, like getting into their supply chain and sort of like what they did with the beepers, except making things explode on the missile launchers, or hacking some of these systems before they're used. Unit 8200 is probably very busy right now trying to figure out how to derail some of this. But also, let's just remember, no system is hermetic. And the air defenses, as good as I think the Israeli systems were, and I think the number was 83%, if I'm not mistaken, success rate of the Arrow 3, it's still 17% that where they got through, and you could see what that did.
And hit apartment blocks.
Yeah, and it hit the Kiryat, and it was dangerously close to the Mossad and dangerously close to the Air Force headquarters and a whole bunch of other targets that you shudder to think about what would have happened if they'd been hit. I think this will be ugly if it gets to the point that I think we all fear. I don't want to paint too bleak of a picture because I am ultimately very bullish and optimistic about Israel and its ability to fight these wars and to do so preemptively and to surprise its enemy. And you've got the United States seemingly on Israel's side. But I think that we have a situation where Israel dodged a bullet last time around. The estimates that I had heard about for what the last war was supposed to do in Israel, the death toll was going to be a lot higher. The destruction was going to be a lot scarier. The duration of the war was supposed to be, there were all these things that could have gone very badly, but didn't. For, I think, reasons that we understand. The Israelis seized the initiative early. It was a preemptive strike. They were hunting missiles. They were doing a lot to keep the regime pinned down. I don't know whether they're able to do that again. And I don't know what capabilities the Islamic Republic has prepared. And I don't know what American air defenses are going to look like. We could have higher casualties this time around. We could have more destruction this time around. And I'm not saying this to scare. I'm just saying this is what happens typically when countries go to war. Look at Ukraine, right? You can look at some of the damage that they've incurred over there. I think the Israelis are probably thinking about that. And it may be one of the reasons why they're not as eager to rush into this conflict, because they don't have people on the ground ready to launch a drone war before Iran even knows what happens. So I'm trying to read the tea leaves. People are quiet in Israel about a lot of this, as well they should be. I'm glad they are. We should not know what their plans are. Let's hope they've got more tricks up their sleeve, because that's what they're going to need.
Perfect note to end on. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Boundless Insights. This show is produced by Yochai Meital and Alma Ben-Zev. Whether you've been with us from the start or are just discovering our show, we are so glad you're here. If today's conversation sparked a question, challenged your thinking, or made you nod vigorously, I want to hear from you. Email me at podcast@boundlessisrael.org. Your feedback gives us ideas for new topics and new guests. And if you believe these conversations matter, there are 3 easy ways to support the show. First, follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Second, help us spread the word. Share an episode with friends and family, post about it, or mention it in a group chat. It really does make a difference. And third, consider supporting our work. Boundless is a nonprofit, and we rely on donors like you. You can make a gift at boundlessisrael.org/donate. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep the conversation going.